Bienvenidos, Ushamdid, and welcome Anne Arundel Community College learners from the Spring 2023 semester taking the CTS-233 Section 400 Network Programmability course. This is the Cisco Networking Academy's DEVASC 200-901 Certification Exam Preparation course, and in this video tutorial, we're going to be taking a second look now at Lab 4.5.5, specifically part number 3, where we're going to be working with APIs and Postman. So you might be wondering, what is Postman? Well, let's dive over into our DevASC virtual machine. Again, everything you see here, when I'm working on my host machine, you would be able to do those things with Postman because you can download it for the Mac, for Windows, for Linux. And so when I'm on the DevASC virtual machine, however, some of the things you're going to see you will not be able to do if you're not in the class and don't have the DevASC virtual machine. So you've got an icon here on the desktop in your DevASC virtual machine. When you double click on that, it's actually going to open this window here for Postman. Now, you'll notice right across the top immediately, and you would see this if you had just downloaded and launched Postman as well, is it's going to tell you you're working in a scratchpad area, right? Working locally, and you could switch to a workspace. So you might think, oh, okay, well, let me click here and, okay, in order to create workspaces, I would need to either create an account or sign in. Now, to do everything we're going to be doing in the class, you do not need an account, but I highly recommend that you get an account because here's what an account is going to offer you. And so I already have an account. I'm going to go ahead and sign in, and let's get this done here. So that is me, and there you go. You can see it recognizes my user ID, and it's going to kick a window open here, or the Postman window, in just a second. And it might actually ask for my two-factor authentication, or will it skip it? Because again, I was just logged in a few seconds ago. So, okay, so here we go. So here are workspaces, right? So think of a workspace as like a directory or a folder in which you can organize the API calls that you're going to be making. And Postman is really a API development tool. It's like a client, right? So just like when we worked on the web page, we were actually working directly with the API there. Here, we're going to be using Postman to make the API calls. Now, the beauty of Postman, if I was to click on my AACPS or AACC link there, you can see that I can create collections like GET requests, POST requests, practice requests, and take a look at all these practice requests. And again, this syncs across multiple platforms. So if I log in on my Mac and my Windows box and here in the DevASC Ubuntu virtual machine, I'm going to see all the work that's been done. It syncs up between all the different systems on which I have Postman installed, and I'm logged in and using my Postman account. So just a quick plug there that you might want to think about creating an account. It's free, right? So it doesn't cost you anything. So why not do it? All right. Well, let's go ahead and take a step back now, and we're going to take a look at the lab here. So it wants us to click on, from the main page here, it wants us to click on the Launchpad tab. And so let's create a workspace, and I'm going to call this workspace Lab 4.5.5, part number 3. Create workspace. All right. Oh, whoops. Okay, so it's going to create the workspace there. Sorry about that. I was filling in the wrong area. Lab 4.5.5, and we'll say part number 3. You could put a summary, and again, you can use Postman to collaborate, right? So you could have a public set of API calls that people could see. You could do team members, right? So you can invite people, or you could just do personal. So I'll just make this personal. We'll say create workspace. All right, so here's my new workspace. Now that I have a workspace, let's do create collection. And again, this isn't part of the lab, but this is something you may want to think about doing. So I'm going to go ahead and say, for this collection, I'm going to go ahead and call it GET requests. And we'll go ahead and just hit the carriage return key, and you can see that now I have a collection of GET requests under the workspace Lab 4.5.5 part 3. All right, well, let's go ahead and add a request. So here we are in the request area, and this is what it's asking us to do. And I'm just going to simply go ahead and call this get 001. And I hit enter and you can see that it is saved. I could always edit the name if I wanted to edit it. But here's what we want to do. We want to make a GET request. And so it wants us to return to the school library API in Chromium, and if necessary, go ahead and extend out the get books request from right here, right? So let's extend that out because it wants you to paste, right, or grab the URL and paste whatever the URL would be, but they actually give you the URL, right? So do we need to come over here and cut and paste? We actually don't, right? It gives you the URL. So if I just pull Postman up here, let's type in http://library.demo.local/API/version1/books, right? Now remember, there's no query parameters here yet, right? This is just a straight up, hey, I want to go ahead and execute this. So I'm going to click save because now this request is saved. So if I ever wanted to come back to this request, just like I showed you the AACC workspace for CTS-233, I could come back in and all my GET requests are going to be there. In fact, if I logged in on another system somewhere and with my Postman account, all of those things would be there. So let's go ahead and click send and let's see what happens here. All right, well, here we are down in the bottom area and you can see that it's going to go ahead and return. And let me make this a little bit bigger here. It's going to go ahead and return a response from our API call. So what do we see down here, right? Well, first and foremost, let's take a look. If you hover over things, it's going to give you a lot of useful information, especially if this is a 401 or a 400 or a 404. You can hover over it and you can see what's going on here. Let's take a look at the time, right? How long did it take for this request to be satisfied? And you could take a look at breaks it down. To initialize the socket, 1.8 milliseconds. To do the DNS lookup, the TCP handshake, the transfer start, how long to download the information, total 150 milliseconds, or I'm sorry, total down here shows actually 162. What was the response size? So it gives you all this information here. What if I wanted to save this JSON output to a file? Well, I could click on Save File. Now, again, on the virtual machine, and I'm running VMware Fusion on a Mac to run this, for some reason, you'll notice that sometimes the dialogues to save will open up behind the actual window you're working in. So I'll just call this get-001 so I could save that. Why is that important? Because maybe I want to practice my Python and parsing a simple set of data like this, and doesn't that make it easy, right? So not only can you run it, get the response, and save the information, but you could work on this data later. Now, here's one of the greatest features about Postman, is it will give you the Python code that you need. How does it do that? All you need to do is come right over here to this little, on the far right-hand side where it says, the left bracket / right bracket code. Well, let's click on that. Okay, well, here's the curl request. Okay, so it gives you the curl request, similar to what we saw in the library API web page, but look at the drop down here. These are all of the different languages in which it will give you that HTTP GET request that we just ran in code. So Python or R or Ruby, a shell, PHP. So we want Python with the requests library. And take a look at that. So I type the URI in here, or the URL, in order to run my GET request. I get my output, and Postman will give you the Python code that you could literally copy, come down here, and I'll do a VS Code example. So I could say file, new file. It's going to be a Python file. I'm going to oops, sorry, it doesn't like doing that, the right click. So we'll do paste. I'm going to paste that in here, and I'm going to go ahead and say file save, or save as, and again, it opens the dialog box behind, and we're just going to call this get-001.py. I'll click save, because now I just say run without debugging. Boom. There it is. Postman, just like Chat GPT, you can go in and say, hey, I need, give me the Python code in order to create a query request to MapQuest to do whatever. Here, it's kind of the same thing. Postman gives you the code, the Python code that you need in order to run the request that you just ran. And the same is true. Let's pop over here and let's pull Postman up on the Mac. And you can see I'm already logged in here and I've got my different workspaces. And take a look. On my host system, on a totally mutually exclusive system from the virtual machine, look at that. My workspace has already been updated. I come in here. Oh, well, isn't that funny? Here's this work, right, that I just did. So if I'm on a different system, can't get access to the virtual machine, I can come into Postman and my request is here. But here's the beauty of this, right? If I was to change workspaces and flip over to MapQuest, right, I've got some GET requests. And the reason I'm coming in here is because my key is already in here. But take a look at what happens down here in the query parameters section. What if I change this? I wanted to go from New York. And you can see it's changing it up here in the actual GET request URI. And I don't want to go New York, San Francisco. We're going to go from New York to Seattle, right? And then I'm going to go ahead and save that because now this is the new request that I'm saving. I'm going to click send and watch what happens down here. Boom, all of the MapQuest JSON output. And again, if I wanted to flip it to some other format, I could certainly do that, right? But we don't want XML. We want the JSON. So here's our JSON output right here. Now, this is the power of the Postman API. And as a learner, leverage this, right? Just like the Chat GPT. Here's that code button. You're probably wondering, well, wait a minute, is it going to be able to figure all of this out? Remember, that's our scheme, right? How we're connecting, HTTP or HTTPS. Here's the authority. The authority right to here, which is, think of it as just like the URL that you're going to go to, right? The web page you're going to. And then here's the query string. And after the question mark, there's all the query parameters. And that's it. That's all there is to an API request. And then let's click on the code button and you can see Python requests. Here it is. So you've got the URL has all this information in here. Now, this is one way to do it. You could move some of this into the headers section, but this is the way they've got it. So all I'd have to do is copy this. Let's say copy. And I believe I have VS Code running here. Yep, Visual Studio Code. So here it is. So we'll say file, new file. It's going to be a Python file. I can paste that information right in here. There is my request. And again, this is one way to do it where you just jam everything in here, but this is probably not the optimal way to do it. But it's going to work. It's going to get you started and help you maybe figure out, oh, okay, how could I do this differently? What if I didn't want it to be Seattle to New York? What if I wanted to put the headers down here, right? So this is a good example, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to go ahead and say file save. And I think, did I already save this? Say file save. All right, and we'll just call this, get001.py. And then we're going to come up here. I'm going to say run without debugging. And there it is. There is all of that JSON data, right? So how cool is that? That Postman, based on the GET request you provide it, and it's the same with a post, a put, a delete, whatever the case may be, Postman will give you the Python code that you need in order to run the request that you want using Python, right? How cool is that? All right, so let's get back to the lab. So now we're going to get a token using the post, the login via basic API, right? So here we go. So maybe I want to do a new collection, right? Because the post request isn't a GET request. So I'm going to say this is a post request. So QUEST. All right, so I just created a collection, and now I just click on Add Request. So here we are, new request name, and this is just going to be post001. Again, I'm just giving them kind of generic names here. And here's where we would put, and we want to change the drop down, right? Because that was GET. We want to change it to post. Let's click on Save, even though we haven't typed anything in here yet. but it wants us to get the token that we're going to need, right? And because of the token, that XAPI token is kind of keeping things locked up a little bit. So let's go ahead and put our URL in here, which is library demo local API version 1, and this was just login via basic. So I'm going to click save. Now, anytime I run this, what's it going to do? Well, we may run into an issue here. Remember, you might remember that we had to provide the username password, but that's okay, right? Yeah, this is exactly what we want to see. 401, right? And why do we want to see this? This failure is a great thing. So we take a look at this and we realize, oh, wait a second, we're getting a 401 here, specifically used when authentication's possible but has failed or not yet been provided. And this should trigger that, oh, right, we had to use that Cisco 123 bang for authorization. Well, let me come back over here to the school library API, and let's come down to post login via basic. And you'll notice again, so it shows that they're unlocked, right? There's like that little gap right there, which I don't know. To me, it seems like it's backwards because when you authorize, I would think that it should show the lock. So you can see here. So what if I said, try it out, and I say execute? All right, so now we get the sign in thing. So let me click sign in, and okay, let's click execute, and there we go. And you see every time we execute, we're getting a new token down here. But the key is I came into the web interface in order to provide the authentication because over here, it was telling me, hey, this isn't working for you, right? Because there was no authorization. So let's click on authorization, and this is what it says. It says, click on authorization within this area, complete the following. And you can see inherit auth from, and it's going to give you all of these different options here. So what if we just run this right now? What's going to happen again? Yeah, we're going to get a 401 unauthorized. So what do? We click on authorization, we click on the type, and it's just basic auth, right? That's what we're doing, just basic auth. It's username, password. And so our username is Cisco, and the password is Cisco 123 bang. And if I was to click on show password, you can see, oh, okay, cool. We're going to save our requests, and now we're going to come back over to the parameters area here because this is going to allow me to see the token. So now we get the token. So in the API, and again, the reason I wanted to have it fail and then pull the API and show you, yeah, when you click on, try now, it gives us the pop-up box up here. In Postman, right, we just click on authorization. We click the type drop-down, change it to basic auth, and then we put the username and password information in. And now we've got this token, this XAPI token, which we needed. And last time in the API, we only needed that, what was in between the double quotes. Here in Postman, you're going to see it's a little bit different. So now we're going to add a book using a post request. Well, okay, if I click on post request, if I do, oops, sorry, I didn't want to do, could have done request. So if I click on post request, you can see that for me to create a new request, I can simply click on the plus sign here. We're going to make it a post request, and we're going to give it a name. Let's go ahead and click on save, and it's going to give us a dialog. We'll put the name in here. Request name is going to be, and we're just going to call this post books or book.001. And we'll click on save. And there we go. So we click the plus sign right up here, gave us a dialog, and now here's this new post request I have. So I could, after I make a change to it, I could save it. So let's go ahead and let's put in that same HTTP, and you can see, look at, this is one of the great things, right? It's gonna kind of tee things up for us as we use it and remember what it is that we've been doing. And so this is going to be a post request. It's going to go to the API v1 books, and let's see what we got down here. So under authorization, right, what am I going to have to provide for authorization? Well, for a post request, it's not basic auth. Basic auth got me the token. For the post request, it's an API key, right? And so then in the field here, we can type in, for the key, we're going to put in X API, X space API, or dash key, sorry. So it's X dash API dash key, and our value is going to be what? Well, remember, we just generated that key. So what would I have to do? I can just click on this post request. Here it is. And again, we're focused on just the key, just the key part here, even though it returns all of that stuff. So we'll say copy. So we copy that request. I'm going to drop back over here. And what is my value? And you can see we're going to add it to the header. And the header is what is getting sent in along with this API request. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. And so there is the entire token. So let's go ahead and in the authorization area, you can see right here it says body. So if we click on body, this is how do I want the format of my input to be, right? So we're going to go ahead and you can see it's set on none right now. And actually, I'm sorry, I wanted to pop back. Thought we might have been over here. We want to be in the body. I'm just making sure I'm in the right spot. And it should have been, so, oh, raw, right. I'm sorry. We want it in raw. I was thinking JSON, and I'm like, the JSON's not here. So we want it in raw, right? So I'm going to click on raw, and then I'm going to click on the text. And what do we want? We want JSON. I was expecting to see JSON up here. I forgot that we click on text and then JSON, right? So I want that raw JSON information that I'm providing, right? So this is me saying, hey, I'm providing JSON raw data to you, the API server, for the post request that I'm submitting. And what is this going to look like? Well, let's go ahead and type it in. So we've got ID, and we're going to put in :4. And if you're wondering, all we're doing here, this is a dictionary. It's a Python dictionary that we're working with, even though technically we're providing a JSON object because JSON objects are enclosed in the curly braces. Think of it as just nothing more than a Python dictionary with key value pairs. And so the title of the book is going to be IPv6 Fundamentals. Fundamentals. And then we're just separating our key value pairs. And sure, we'll leave it with a silly name like that. And then we've got the author. And we'll come over here. And it's going to be Rick. And this is probably going to give, okay, good. Thought I was going to put a bunch of straight characters there. And then finally, we're going to drop in an ISBN, right? Just key value pairs. We're creating our own JSON here, which again is nothing more than a Python dictionary. 158.144.778, I think is the ISBN. Okay, so there we go. So here's the post request, and I can click save. So I can save what I did, and I can click send. And let's see what happens, because we had the right XAPI key, right? And so here we go. Status 200, it took 20 milliseconds. Size of the response overall, it gives you the body and the header size. And this is what we sent in. So now if I was to come back to this and I wanted to practice and maybe submit a different book, I could absolutely do that super, super easy, right? I could come in here. This is the output down here. I could come in and do something like this. And I don't know if they're going to have us do this. So I'll do 55 and I'll just put in some bogus values there. So then all I have to do is change these values. We'll just call it IPv6 and we'll say some dude, and we'll put in a different ISBN number. There we go. And so then I could send that request in. And boom, it should have added that book based on what I had up here. Now, again, the beauty of Postman, okay, I'm not doing my class project in Postman. I'm writing a Python script. Okay, well, let's click on the code button over here. Look at that. Because now it's showing you how it's using the payload, right, which is this json.dumps call. We've seen that before, right? And then the headers. So here's your XAPI key. So we pass these things and we send these to the API server so that we can authenticate, right? What's the content type I'm sending? Application JSON when I clicked right up here. That's what we're doing. So these GUI options, these graphical options that we're using, here is the exact code that we would need to take this, simply copy this. Let me do a right click there. Simply copy that, bring it over to VS Code, and I'm not going to run through the whole thing here, but bring it to VS Code, create a file, a Python file, and then paste that information in here. And now you've got the Python code that you can sit and experiment with. So let's close that out here so we can see all of that. And there it is, right? So Postman is a phenomenal tool. Okay, so we've done that. So now let's verify, now that I've told you, oh, hey, we just did all these book editions right here. Let's check and see, did I add anything? Well, how would we check that? Well, remember, in the web page, you would just go back to the Get Books. Well, guess what? There it is right there. Okay, let's click send. Boom. What do we see? Hey, there's Rick Graziani and there's IPv6 by some dude, right? So both of those requests got added. So absolutely fantastic. So now we're going to use some additional parameters with the Get Books API. So it says go to the school library API, and this is where we're going to get into the ISBN possibly, as well as the sort by stuff. And you can see it's got the include ISBN, it's got the sort by, it's got the author, and it's got the page. And so if I was to say try it out as a quick refresher, can we include the ISBN? I'm going to say true. Sort by, and we're going to do author here. So I'll click on there and we'll change it to author. And so then I'm going to go ahead and say execute. So what do you see in the web API? Well, it doesn't give us the Python code. We get the curl command, right? So very cool that we get the curl command so we could copy and paste and use that. We get the URL here, right? Well, let's grab that because maybe we may need this later. We'll see. So there's the URL. So I could copy this and paste this into, I create a GET request in Postman that is sorting by author and is listing the ISBN numbers along with it. So pretty cool. And now again, I have the entire string here, and you can see we now have query parameters here, right? So this is our query after the question mark, and there's our query parameters. It's include ISBN, and again, that's a little small, excuse me, equals true, and sort by equal author. So we've got multiple parameters that we're using in our API GET request to the local library API server. So let's go ahead and go back over here to Postman. They're going to have us transition over here to Postman. Go to the first tab, right? And you can see I've got my requests are tabbing up here, so let me kill that. My requests are tabbing up here, right? So I can just click in between the tabs, or I can just click over here, either way. So it says come back to the first tab, and you're now going to include some of those parameters from the school library API. And here's how easy it is to do that, right? So if I click on params, you can see right here, I've got key value pairs, and I can even put a little description over here. So, okay, what is a key that I might want to add here? Well, how about include ISBN? And then the value, right? So what this is saying, and we'll say, oh, sorry, they want lowercase true. So what this is saying is key value pairs, right? So include ISBN equals true. Well, we also have this other one called sort by, and what would be the value? I want to sort by, do I want to sort by ISBN? No, we want to sort by author. And look what's happening up here. Now, remember, I copied that entire string, so I could have pasted it in here, but it's good to see that you can put it in here, because if we save this request now, if I say later on, oh, you know what, I don't want to sort by author, I want to sort by ISBN, right? And look at that, it changes it up here in the query string. But we're going to stick with author. And that's how easy it is to come in here in a graphical sort of a representation of what we're doing and put our key value pairs for the query, right? So include ISBN is true, sort by author, right? And so that's what we're going to do. Now, let's go ahead and run this request. So I'll click send, and you should see we get the same output. Yeah, it's definitely going by author. Cisco Systems, Cisco, Mr. Blah, R for Rick Graziani, S for some dude, and ST for Steph Mark Osmaruk, right? And so we get the output down here. So now you might be curious, okay, well, what does all that look like as Python code? Click on the code thing. There it is. Now, see, they jam it all up into the URL here, and they leave the payload and the headers blank, right? But if you were to go back and look at the post that we just did, would this give you an idea of, okay, what would I put into the headers, or what would I put in the payload? Yeah, it would, right? So right now they've got everything jammed. Oops, sorry. They have everything jammed here into the URL so that the payload and headers really aren't being used. They're just empty, right? So, but this is one way to do it. We're definitely going to see another way to do it with the urllib.parse library in Python. All right, well, that is Postman. And man, there is a ton of great stuff going on with Postman. So definitely fire Postman up, start creating some API requests using that local library. Or, as I demonstrated here, download Postman onto your local host system, whether it's a Mac, a Windows, or a Linux box. Go into the MapQuest API for the developer, right? Because you've created an account for that, and start digging in. See what it's all about when you can copy a request. You generate yourself a key, bring that key over, and then just go to town and start changing things up and seeing how it works. All right, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.